Listen to the rumble. Listen to the roar. Slowly in 3. They'll be flying off 4. Watch them now.
All right, vintage race fans, here we go. This edition of Vintage Racing Podcast features my good friend Bobby Green of Los Angeles, California. You may know Bobby better from his hot rod and race cars of the Old Crow Speed Shop or his involvement with the 1933 group. Bobby finally got me to take a few days off and invited my wife Jenny and I out to see the sights in California, check out some of his restaurants and bars around LA, but most importantly, check out his collection of cars and antiques, as well as looking into the running gear on his latest addition to the stable, the Ralph DePalma two-man Miller IndyCar. It's a gorgeous two-man Miller. It's a straight 8 Miller. It's the real thing. And we've been kind of playing with it today and yesterday, and we're looking at trying to fire it off here, seeing if it's all going to go well. Bobby's lovely wife, Carol, and Jenny are great friends, and they are out having fun, so Bobby and I had a chance to sit down and chat. Bobby is a very energetic lad and has accomplished a lot. His love and passion for traditional hot rodding has strongly influenced his numerous historical restaurants and bars. He and his 1933 group, they've found them, they've designed them, in some cases they've restored them back to their most glorious period. We got to go to a couple of those just phenomenal historical sites around Los Angeles. On top of all that, a few years ago, Bobby teamed up with our friend Mel and the other Oilers Car Club members and brought us the Race of Gentlemen to the level that we know today. Just a world-renowned vintage race, and Bobby was involved with that for a few years, helping them out, and he can tell us some about that. T.R.O.G, as it has become known, has been discussed in previous podcasts. So a lot of you know about it, and you'll hear some interesting things about what it takes to put on a vintage race like that. So we're going to try to fit as much as we can in what I'm going to refer to as Bobby and Josh Episode 1, simply because, Bobby, you and I have endless topics we discuss every time we hang out, from hot rodding to vintage Indy cars, to the events, to young people, what they're going to do, where the scene is going, what's going to happen, and what could help that, what could hurt it. You've been to Goodwin in England. You hold multiple land speed records. You got a vintage clothing line. It's on and on and on. So there's a lot to talk about, and we're not going to get to it all today, but I'd like to just get started. So let's go ahead and get the bars and restaurants out of the way, because as everyone knows, to play, you got to pay, and to pay, you got to have a job.
Everyone's got to have a job. That's for sure.
So say hello and tell us a little bit about that, and bring us, you can start at the beginning and bring us up to your first hot rod you built, and then we'll go racing.
Well, Josh, first of all, it's great to see you in California.
Yes.
I've been bugging you to get out here forever, and
you've literally forced me. That is what it took.
Yeah.
You just kept dangling the carrot, and it worked out that we had a 4 or 5 days break here, and
perfect.
Was able to do it.
Well, you picked a good time. The weather's great.
Yeah.
So anyway, great to see you. Thanks for asking me to do the podcast. This is awesome.
Excellent. Thank you. Where the hell are you originally from? You're not a California born.
No, born in Oklahoma, but raised here.
Cool.
So I had my first 10 years in Oklahoma, which I'm really glad I did, because, that kind of like keeps you grounded. Like, how a combine works, and you know old trucks, and you're around cows, all those things that Californians have no clue about. How to run around barefoot in the woods, So I was glad I had those early formative years to just be a red-blooded American type. And then you came out to California, and coming from Oklahoma to California at the age of 10 is like going to another planet.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine like rolling into town.
The culture shock I've had, and I'm 44.
Yeah.
To 10, I would be Like you went to another planet.
Oh yeah, another planet. I mean, to me, LA was the big city. You know, most people look at LA like a giant, not like a big suburb, like it's not a city. But to me, it was a city compared to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You know, I'd never been to New York or whatever. So, but that's what California. It was 1980.
Okay.
We moved here, 10 years old, and that's when California was cool. 1980, because you still had 50s car, you had 40s cars, 50s cars on the road.
Yeah.
It was that weird age where like they were either just got restored, you know, turquoise Chevys and pink Cadillacs, or they're still someone's daily driver.
Yeah.
You know, so you had like both styles hitting the road. But the cool thing was they were everywhere, because for some reason back then LA didn't have the traffic woes that it has now.
Okay.
And people drove old cars. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, a 50s car was only 30 years old.
Yeah, it'd be like us seeing a 90s, early 90s, late 80s truck.
Right.
Hell, I own one.
Yeah. Yeah.
They drive it a lot. So
They're around.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But that was like, it was like rolling Easter eggs. I mean, it was like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like jelly beans.
Yeah, man.
For me, because Oklahoma, things would get eaten up in Oklahoma.
Okay.
You know, like you didn't see at that time a lot of people restoring, you know, 57 Chevys.
Yeah.
But out here it was booming. And so, yeah, that's what instantly turned me into a car guy, because I didn't come from a car family. Like my family were farmers and artists.
That's very interesting. You mentioned that to me, you know, one of the first times we talked, and it's interesting to me that because so many of us come up in racing families, or our dad were hot rodders, and we kind of came up around that, but not everyone. And I've met guys that, you know, were not born into a racing family and now they're world champions. You know, and you're kind of that way. You weren't, you know, you didn't grow up around hot rods, but you're damn sure doing it now on a great scale. So that's cool, man. It's like, it's almost you know, a passion that you found on your own. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. You know, my parents got divorced early, and my dad stayed back in Oklahoma. So I kind of I don't know. I had to find my own way. Mm-hmm. You know, I was my own man of the house, and I just had to like figure out what I wanted to do and make it happen. And so, you know, and cars shaped a lot of what I did.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we'll talk about the restaurants and bars, but the restaurants and bars, they're all vintage. Mm-hmm. Everything's vintage inspired, or a restoration of a vintage place. But I wouldn't have the interest in vintage had I not started with old cars. Yeah. That was like the gateway drug to what I have now. Sense. Yeah. So now I'm a full-blown heroin addict, you know. Yes. But yeah, that starts you with the appreciation. The cars start you with the appreciation of old things, and then that slowly bleeds into architecture, clothing, music, you know, style.
You start staring at the old magazines and old pictures, and everything starts coming in.
Yeah. You know, when you first get your old car, you want to take a picture of your old car in front of a building that looks like it was the same era. Yeah. And then you start appreciating that style of building, and you start noticing all the details of that. So it just slowly, but that's where it started with cars. Cool. You know, because as a kid, anything old was usually just you know, run down, or it wasn't like something you would restore. Not at that time, not in like the 70s, you know. But so as soon as I could get a driver's license, I wanted an old car. My first car, a 57 Chevy Bel Air. And
what'd you pay for that?
I think it was $3,000.
Okay.
And interestingly,
did you have your license, or were you still 15?
I had my learner's permit.
Okay.
Yeah. But the funny thing about it was, like at that time, I didn't know custom versus stock versus hot rod. You know, like you're so young, and if you don't come from a hot rod dad family, you don't quite know what's going on there.
For all you knew, they looked like that from the factory.
Just old cars. Old cars were cool. Yeah, they're all cool. So I found my aunt had mailed me a little clipping from she lived up near San Francisco, and she knew I was looking for an old car, so she sends me a little clipping out of the penny saver for a 57 Chevy for sale, and it was this tiny little black and white picture, right? And so I was like, oh, that looks like a cool car. So I call the guy and we work a deal. I'm like, you think you could drive it down? You think you could deliver it? He's like, yeah, they'll probably make it. And he's telling me about the car and all this stuff he did to it, like in the 60s, and I don't know what he's talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Sure, sounds good.
You shaved it? Okay. I don't know. Was it hairy?
Really?
Yeah. So I didn't know what he was talking about. So
would have been key terms that a hot rodder would have been perking up on.
Oh, totally. Yeah. But,
That's
15 years old, you're just getting into it. And so he drives the thing down. He delivers it to me. And it was a beater. I mean, it was a car he started working on in the 60s and kind of like never finished.
Yeah.
So it was primered. It was gray primer.
Cool.
It had 3-bar flipper caps on it. It was lowered. It had a 57 Buick grill.
Oh, wow.
Put into the mouth. It had Nomad rear bumper and trim work.
Yeah.
It was shaved. Had a 59 Impala steering wheel.
Oh, man.
Chromed out dash.
Damn.
It had a 283 out of a Corvette with a 4 on the floor with a Hearst shifter.
Oh, that's cool.
Like it was
that's
like,
a pretty cool piece.
It was something that if I saw now, like, wow.
Yeah.
Which is super neat now because you rarely ever see a customized 57 Chevy.
Yeah, exactly.
The guy even took the little bomb sights off the front of the hood, and they weren't fully shaved in. They were made into these little spiky scoops.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was kind of goofy.
But that's cool.
If you think back to the 60s, guys were doing weird stuff.
I can't remember the last time I saw a custom 57.
Yeah, you just
They're
never
either
seen them.
gassers or they're stock or yeah.
So that started not only got me into old cars and meeting everybody, but it got me into meeting people who are into customs and hot rods. And I'd cruise it to Bob's Big Boy and Fridays. I'd go to anywhere that there was an old car meet. 15, 16. These old guys are looking at me like I'm a whack job. and then back then, 1985, 86. The most asked question ever was, "What are you going to paint it?" When are you going to finish it?
Yeah. Yeah, primer wasn't accepted.
Right. It wasn't that cool back then. But I didn't have any money to paint it anyway, so I could barely keep it alive. I mean, I had to buy those oil restrictors for the spark plugs.
Yeah.
The anti-fouler cups, and the whole right side of the motor would get fouled up like weekly.
Nice.
And I'd have to pull them out and clean them and stick them. I mean, the thing was tired.
Yeah, but it taught you early how to work on it.
Oh yeah, that's what taught me. And then my dad, my stepdad at the time, bought me. One of those like all-in-one mechanic tool kits,
cool.
From Craftsman.
Yeah.
And so that's whatever would break. That's how I learned to fix it.
That's very cool.
Yeah, that's how I figured it out.
How long did you own that?
I owned that probably. It's sad. It got stolen.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's a bummer story. I loaned it out. It got to a point where it needed so much work. And I couldn't afford to fix it. And so I parked it at my mom's for a long time. And then some guy she knew was like in the movie industry.
Yeah.
And they needed a car for, I think it was the Liz Taylor story. It was like NBC or something.
It's probably pretty common around here.
And so then the guy... I'm like, yeah, okay, and the guy's gonna rent it for $500.
Oh, yeah.
And
You're happy.
But the cool thing was, he's like, okay, we're gonna fix the brakes and we're gonna paint it. And
wow.
I was like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
And so he takes it, and I didn't know anything about renting a car to a movie back then. I didn't know. And so he takes it. Then they call me. They're like, hey, they need to wreck the car into a tree.
Oh, Jesus.
I was like, really? They do? And he's like, yeah, but they'll buy the car from me. You just tell us what you want for it. And at that point, I was like, I needed the money more than I needed the car because it was just sitting in my mom's.
Yeah.
So I think I said, all right, just give me $5,000, and I'll just buy something that runs. Because at that time, I just had this little Honda motorcycle that was my daily driver.
Okay.
And so they said, yeah. And then I never got the check, and it disappeared. Like, the shoot was over.
Oh,
the guy disappeared.
Dispersed?
Yeah, the guy's phone number was disconnected.
Ah, shit.
It was a bummer. But
that's probably halfway common as well.
Yeah, yeah. But
like
I still,
I wish
you
didn't know how it was dealing with movie
Yeah,
stuff.
I don't know. I was just a kid, but I wish I still had my first car. But that was
I
probably.
wonder if they
like,
even ever crashed it. You know.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Who knows?
The first movie that came to mind was The Heavenly Kid.
Yeah.
Was that a 57 Chevy in that?
Was that? I don't remember.
And they crashed at the end? Mm-hmm. That could have been your car, Bobby.
Someone's probably out there with a 57 Buick grill made to fit a 57 Chevy.
So
anyway, if you have that car, give me a call.
Yeah, you can got Bobby by the short hairs.
Yeah. I want my first car again.
Now, did you go, what was your first job? Because I know you didn't get into the restaurant stuff right away. Were you trying to work at auto parts stores and stuff, or
No.
What else were you into? Usually someone had another vice as well.
Well, I only had one automotive job ever, and I have to start off by saying I was fired from every job I ever had. Which is why I had to work for myself, basically. I went and got a job at Nissan detailing cars.
Okay.
I was probably 18 years old.
Yeah, I did that in high school.
Because my buddy Piero was going to do the same thing. And it was so funny because we were friends, right? And we're living together. And we're sharing an apartment in Santa Monica. And so we're like, you know what? Why don't we just go together to job interviews? Oh, yeah. Maybe they'll hire both of us. Wouldn't that, can you imagine? Yeah, they'll hire both of us. It'll be great. So he gets hired at Lexus, and then I get hired at Nissan. I think that lasted about a month. Yeah. And then they're like, yeah, we're going to let you go. I don't even remember why. But can you see me detailing cars at Nissan anyway?
Not at all.
And so then I started working, I worked at a little 50s diner for about a week. Mm-hmm. Then I started working in coffee houses. Okay. Because that was a cool job to have. This was the pre-Starbucks days, right? So this was when coffee houses were like bars for people under 21. Yeah. It was a social scene. Yeah. People hang out all night, play chess, have art shows. Yeah. And I just
had the visions in my head. You see like the painting of James Dean and Marilyn Monroe and them, and they're like at the paintings, they're hanging out at a coffee shop.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was a big thing.
And I was in the art world. Because that's the one thing I took from my dad. He put me in my first drawing class like age 6. Okay. But so I was into art and design. I wanted to go on and be a product designer, graphic designer, or industrial designer. I wanted to do something like with my hands, and so I knew a lot of artists, and so I was working in coffee houses and meeting more artists and getting fired, and then going to the next coffee house. So the only job I never got fired from, right, was the last job. I was working at a coffee house, and I quit to open my own coffee house. Wow. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Nice. And it ended on good terms. Probably the day before they were going to fire me. No, they were cool. And so when I was 23, I opened my own coffee house with a couple buddies.
Wow. That's excellent.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it was a coffee house that I used to work at and got fired from. Yeah. And then the guy calls me one day. He's like, hey, I'm thinking about selling. And you and your friends are always telling me how you could do a better job than me. So do you want to buy me out?
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's real good.
Hilarious. And had it not been for cars, I wouldn't have been able to buy them out. Yeah. So I had picked up along the way a Nash Metropolitan. Okay. Little black and white Nash Metropolitan. Had no transmission. I meet some guy at Bob's Big Boy. They call him Metro Bob. Yeah. He's like, I got a transmission on the side of the house. Come over and get it. He gave it to me for free. Nice. Put it in. It worked fine. And so anyway, I was able to sell that car, maybe $3,500, and then my other friend threw in a $3,500, and we bought the guy out. Nice. And so it was this cool little coffee, the size of this like the size of a bedroom,
like a 10 by 10.
Yeah. And we made it cool. Like we did this like tiki sci-fi theme to the whole place.
Okay. Now, was this on like a main drag or a shopping mall? Or?
Oh yeah, it was on Santa Monica Boulevard
Wow.
in West Los Angeles.
Damn.
Major street.
Cool.
Yeah. And we did art shows. We would open at 7 p.m. and close at like 4 or 5 in the morning.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
And we lived near UC. It was near UCLA, so we got all the UCLA kids hanging out.
Good scenery.
Yeah. I met so many cool people.
That's excellent.
It was great. And so that was my college. Was running a coffee house for 6 years.
That's better. That's better college than 99% of kids are getting.
Yeah.
Real experience.
Still made no money.
Yeah, but still, man, the what you learn dealing with the public.
Yeah.
I've said that before. I said every kid in countries have laws where every kid has to go through the military, stuff like that. And I firmly believe that every kid, and if you have a kid, make them work in a job serving the public for 6 months.
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool?
That's all it takes.
Yeah.
You will learn a lot about how to treat people, how people really are, how to save, how to think, how to,
Absolutely.
how to read people. It's real.
It's true. And I was a people person anyway. I love people. I love throwing parties and entertaining people. And so I just met so many great people working at the coffee house. And it allowed me to play a little bit with cars. I got a 54 Ford.
Cool.
Slammed, black primer, red interior. I did all this work to it.
Yes.
Had a 351, Windsor in it. That was a fun car. And the coffee house barely made enough money to survive. And Piero and I were living in a rent control apartment, which not many people know about. But in Santa Monica, used to have rent control.
What's that?
It was like the city would state but they put caps on what landlords could charge for rent.
Okay.
So, and they were hard to get, right?
Yeah.
But if you could get one, you were paying like a quarter less than anybody around you.
Nice.
So we were paying, I think our rent, and this was 11 blocks from the beach. I think our rent was a $950 a month, and we split it.
Oh, wow.
Right? So we're each paying about $450 a month. Just
unheard of.
Unheard of. But luckily that afforded us to, survive off of and run a little business, and then play with cars a little bit.
When there's two things I want to jump to next. One is, when did the dark red Roadster come about? Mm-hmm. Because I know that car. I knew that car before I knew you, and then you told me about. When you wanted to start your first bar, the Bigfoot Lodge, I believe, you had drawn up like a complete presentation and like had this idea on paper, and you kept going around trying to get investors in that.
Exactly. That was during the coffee house years.
Okay,
yeah. So a couple years into the coffee house.
So ambitious, man. I like that.
Oh,
you
thanks.
hear those stories, but you don't see it. We don't know anyone like that, so it's cool to tell that story. That's good.
It's like I always tell people, man. Like LA is the land of opportunity if you hustle. Like if you just beating the pavement, you'll get somewhere. Mm-hmm. So a couple years in the coffee house, I was like, man, I love what I'm doing, right? But I think I need to open a bar if I want to make more profit, doing what I'm doing. And so I created that little book. It was a lookbook, what the bar would be like an old ski lodge.
How'd you come up with that? Just
we used to sit around. Me and friends would sit around, coming up with ideas all night long. That's all we did was just come up with either products or ideas for a cool place. And we had so many bar ideas. But I love the Bigfoot Lodge one because at the time. I was a big fan of Twin Peaks, the TV show, and it reminded me of going skiing as a kid in Colorado.
Yes.
Like a log cabin, and it was something that LA didn't have.
Yeah,
you couldn't go to a log cabin place, a bar to hang out.
Yes,
and I wanted to do something totally, juxtaposed from the city. That was more like a theme park for drinking. So, I shopped that lookbook around for 3 years. Everybody I met, everyone I knew, there were a lot of rich kids hanging out at this coffee house. Their parents were millionaires, and. But none of it came through. Like when it came time to I found a place,
Yes.
Like, oh no, the stock market crashed or whatever. I just bought a car. But luckily, through a friend of a friend, I met the partners I have now, two partners I have now, and they were incredible. And we did it. We opened a bar together. And
that was the form of the 1933 group?
Yeah, that was 1933 group. And we've been...
What year was that?
We met in 98, bar opened in 99.
Wow.
So we're celebrating, in June, it'll be our 20-year anniversary.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah, 20 years.
And now you've got numerous places like that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now we've probably done around 14 places.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know Bobby or what we're talking about, Bobby... He is a designer, and he's a fan of history, like a lot of us are. And what he's done is there's a lot of, obviously in every city, there's a lot of historical places. And Bobby specializes in finding historical old restaurants or bars that might have not only just history to them, but a knack to them, like the old barrel, like the buildings that look like a barrel or a huge hot dog.
Right.
Iconic places. And Bobby you've tried to find those and not only restore them, but get them back, turn them into a restaurant again.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool, man. That's so neat.
It's cool. Well, it goes back to those early days of coming to Los Angeles. You had amazing cars driving around, but then you're also seeing all these really cool buildings, these vintage buildings. And then if you live here long enough, you see them get torn down and turned into condos.
Yeah. Which and like I told you, I expected to see a lot more of that. I'm very pleased at how many old buildings are everywhere out here.
Yeah, it still has a lot of flavor.
I expected everything to be bulldozed and fresh and new and ugly.
Yeah.
Not what I want to see. Yeah. And man, everywhere I drive, I'm seeing amazing old buildings. So
there's a lot.
There were a lot. Rich environment out here.
There was really more. There was a lot more.
Yeah.
And the ones that were really crazy, got torn down first.
Yeah. To round up the restaurant stuff and get on the racing. Explain to us about the Formosa, like what it was, what you're doing, and that'll kind of tell everyone that'll really wrap up what you do with the restaurant.
Okay, yeah. So we restored the oldest bowling alley in Los Angeles.
That was amazing.
1927.
We got to bowl there Saturday night. That was unbelievable.
That was fun. We restored a building that looks like a giant barrel because LA used to be covered in buildings that look like a giant hat or a duck. Or a giant ice cream cone or whatever.
Anything to get people to stop.
Yeah, and they're all gone. The barrel's the last one left.
Wow.
One of the last one left. And then we got the Bulldog Cafe that used to be in the Peterson Museum and brought that over to the place. And so now our third restoration we're on now is the Formosa Cafe. It was like the celebrity hangout in Hollywood from 20s, and through the 90s. Every celebrity you can imagine was either a regular there or frequented there because they worked at the studio across the street.
Yeah, is it? Yeah. Which studio is right across the street? Is it?
It was in the old days. It was Pickford Fairbanks, and then it became United Artists.
Okay, and it's still there.
It's still there.
We just looked the other day. There's a stage door opening and everything right across the street.
Yeah,
so when they would take a lunch break, John Wayne and
Elvis and Marilyn,
they would walk across the street and get lunch here.
And all the gangsters too, Bugsy Siegel and Joey Stempanato, and Bugsy used to run his bookie operations out of there. I mean, there's a million stories, but it's this place that's so revered for Angelinos. It's like this last holdout of old Hollywood, and so we were luckily chosen to be the ones that come and restore the place.
Wow.
Which is super cool.
It's got a train car built into it that was originally there.
It's got the oldest surviving red car train left.
Wow. And explain how that was in there and you couldn't really see it. That amazes me.
Well, it was put there in 1940, and I think in 1940 it was just like, it was like a cheap attic room.
Yeah. Like buying a container today.
Yeah. Exactly. It wasn't like, oh, cool, an old train car. No, it was like, oh, it's only $20 at the surplus yard. Stick it there and then cover it up so it looks like a little skinny room.
Yeah. And then I got to see it this week, and you guys when you tore the walls down, the outside of this train car is still there, and the curved roof and the little windows and everything.
Oh, it's all there.
It's there.
Well, that's what saved it was kind of like, walling it in like a cocoon,
That's unreal.
Yeah.
And you've got so many pictures of the famous people there. You showed me where Bugsy put a safe in the floor
Yep.
to hide, possibly to hide money drops, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Just endless stories.
It's amazing.
And when will that place be ready to go?
We'll be open in a month or two.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's so
it's
cool,
getting
man.
close to the end. It's been almost a 2-year process.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
But enough about that. Let's talk about cars.
That's right.
Stupid.
So then tell
places.
me about the Red Roadster. The reason I asked that is when I built my 32 sedan in the late 90s, I would, like anyone, I went through magazines and I cut out pictures of cars I liked and styles I liked. Maybe this car had headlight mounts I liked. Maybe this car had wheels I liked. And on that board was a red Roadster with magnesium halobrands, spline drive halobrands on the front. It didn't have white walls, which I wasn't a huge white wall fan. This thing just had the look. And it looked like, at the time I was like, oh, that's an original old hot rod that some guy found.
Right.
And it was a picture of you backing it in at a cruising somewhere. And I had no idea who you were. And, here we sit, 30 years later, 20 years later. But tell me how that Roadster came about.
Isn't that funny?
Because that's a good one, man.
I think I was 28 when I finished that. But you probably liked it a lot because it had those Indy wheels on it.
Oh, yeah. That's why I had it taped up.
When I first built
So you can run those on the street.
Yeah. When I first built it, it just had Steelies with white walls.
Okay, yeah.
And then I put those on later.
Wised up.
Yeah. I got wise. No, that happened as soon as we opened the first bar. As soon as we opened Bigfoot Lodge, and I was making a little more money than I was at the coffee house, I was able to start buying pieces.
Cool.
Yeah, that was cool. And
is it a 28, 29?
It's a 30-31 body on 32 rails.
Yep. And what engine?
It now has a nailhead.
Okay.
Yeah, Buick nailhead. Originally had a small block Chevy.
Okay. That's probably why I liked it too. Because I'm a Chevy
maybe.
guy. Everyone, and even back then in the 90s when the traditional hot rods weren't as popular as they are now, there was a dislike for Chevys. No one, don't put a Chevy in it. Everyone runs a Chevy. The problem is not only were we a Chevy family, but that's what we knew. That's what we built. And if you really start studying, if you get into 50s and 60s, there's a lot of flatheads and whatnot. But if you get later into the late 60s, which was the era I was going for, like the 65, 66, the small block Chevys were in a bunch of hot rods. That's what sprint cars were running. You could buy a lot of speed equipment for them.
You could buy them for cheap too.
Yeah,
that was the reason I did it.
That me too. I knew I was going to drive my hot rod across country, and if a water pump went out, I could literally go down any alley and find a water pump out of Monte Carlo, let alone every parts store had parts for it.
It's true. I mean, flatheads are way more reliable now, but if you look at the early 90s, 80s, 90s, it was hard to get flathead parts. Brand new water pumps and all this new stuff you can get now, scat cranks and whatnot. But I was in a few car clubs over the years. I started in a car club called the Blacktop Bombers.
Okay.
And that was in the 90s. That was right around the same time the Shifters and us and a few little clubs, like some of the younger guys were doing stuff.
Yeah, that scene started popping up in the magazines.
Yeah.
It was cool. You could see that. And it started a buzz. It started creating a buzz.
The Chislers were around, who are now the Choppers.
Yeah.
So I was in, and then I ended up starting a new club with a couple of friends called Them.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's excellent.
Yeah. So right when we got together is right when I wanted to build a hot rod. I just had a little bit extra money to do it. So me and my buddies, we found an old hot rod 30 Roadster body out in Pomona. It was neat. It already had a molded in Auburn dash.
Wow.
It was cool.
It had some history.
Yeah. It had this old kind of metallic green paint job. It was all, faded and all. And at that time, but it wasn't quite amazing enough to make a patina car out of. But and then I just slowly, started picking up pieces and bought a welder and figured out how to weld and then built that whole car. And it's funny, I was still living in that apartment in Santa Monica, right? And I had a little tiny backyard. I was the only one in the apartment that had a little tiny backyard, concrete. But to get to it, you had to walk down this long outdoor hallway.
Okay.
That was probably only maybe 5 feet wide, right?
Yeah.
So I built this car back there. So everything, the frame, the body, everything, you had to get a buddy help you, and it had to go in sideways.
Really?
Yeah. And then I, put jack stands on the ground. I just started building the car. And then once the car was finished, it had to be disassembled. And
Just
then
to get it out.
and take it out. And luckily by that time, my buddy Piero had just rented a house with a garage.
Nice.
So I'm like, hey man, can I build the car over there?
So
And
they had no shop, no garage at the time.
no,
That's cool. That's real old school.
and you had to go up steps. You had to go up like it was ridiculous.
You were determined.
Oh yeah,
That's excellent.
That's one thing I'm pretty good at, is being determined.
When did Old Crow Speed Shop come about?
That came much later. That was probably about 2005.
Did you go racing at Bonneville before you?
No.
Okay.
No, I was like volunteering and helping out.
At the not only Bonneville but the lakes.
The lakes, yeah.
Which lakes are running? Which is there only one running now?
Yeah, only El Mirage.
Okay.
There was a couple meets in the 90s at Muroc Lake, but the Air Force shut it down. But yeah, El Mirage. But it was weird, so it was, when I got into Bonneville racing, it wasn't like an open door type of deal. It's a lot easier for people now. Like, it's a much more accessible. But in the late 90s, early 2000s, as a young guy, you didn't know what was going on out there. Like, it wasn't like all the other hot rodders were rolling out there and stuff.
Yeah.
It was still just the old timers.
I agree.
That were running, and
My
it was
first trip was in 02, and it was still like that.
a small meet.
Yeah,
right.
It wasn't a huge crowd scene.
No.
The drivers' meeting was like 50 guys, maybe. It wasn't like a massive crowd scene.
No.
Yeah.
So if you were just a nobody wanting to get into it, it's tough.
I could see that.
Luckily, through the Blacktop Bombers, one of our guys in the club met this guy Tom Evans.
Yeah. Okay.
I think he just met him at a hardware store or something, and they started talking about cars, and sure enough, find out Tom is an old lakes racer, and he does tech for motorcycles, and so that he was our introduction to get into that world. And then you figure out, after talking to people, oh well, you got to join a club. You have to join an SCTA racing club if you want to go race.
Okay.
Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Start building the car, get a rule book, start figuring out what to do. And I wanted to build a belly tank because there were no belly tanks around.
At that time,
yeah, there were no. And at that time, like the Don Montgomery books were about the only thing that was out showing that old stuff.
Yeah, maybe some Tex Smith books.
Yeah, like Tex Smith and Don Montgomery.
Those are the ones I had.
Yeah,
that's it.
And that was it. So you start flipping through all the old pictures, and to me, the belly tank stood out the most. Then you get fascinated with that, and so started building a belly tank right after I finished the Roadster, probably around 2001.
Okay.
Started building that tank.
Where'd you find a tank at?
That was hard, man.
Because they haven't gotten any easier.
Jeez, it was the hardest thing in the world.
And it's funny
to find
too.
a
You
tank.
can find the wrong size tanks.
Everywhere.
But there's a certain size. It's the right one. Yeah.
You need the big one. You can't have the little steel one. You need a big aluminum one, and it has to have that polywog shape. You know, it can't look like a cigar. It has to look like a speeding bullet.
Mm-hmm.
I actually found the tank at a guy's place right next to El Mirage.
Wow.
Yeah, he lived at the edge of the lake bed.
Wow.
And a whole bunch of cool stuff out there.
Okay.
And a friend of mine was out at El Mirage and drove through his place and said, I saw some tanks. And so we went out there and I met the guy, really cool guy named Dave. And that's where I bought the tank. And then I just had a little tiny 2-car garage, and I had the Roadster in there and the belly tank project, and then just built it from scratch. But
Now, is that the Old Crow tank?
That's the Old Crow tank.
I still got to sit in that today, by the way.
Oh yeah. We'll cram you in there.
Yes,
we'll get some Vaseline out.
Oh, I'm a fiend. I got to sit in race cars. So, when you built that? What was the first engine that you put in it? And what was there a record you were going for, or you just wanted to run on the salt in a tank?
Yeah, well, we were looking, as I'm building the car, I'm looking at all the different engine classes and records, right? And we wanted to run vintage.
Yeah.
Right? But the V8 flathead records were crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's 200 miles an hour plus in a Lakester. So then we're looking at the four-banger, Model A. Any American-made pre-36 four-cylinder, basically.
Okay.
And the records were a little softer. And then I'm looking like the supercharged record was open.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, no one had even done it yet.
No one had even attempted it. So
Yeah.
literally you could roll through it 80 mile an hour and you got a record.
Yeah.
Okay.
At Bonneville.
Yeah.
And so I found a guy that had an old sprint car, and it had a Hal single cam head on it. Mm-hmm. And it was a runner. It was a tired runner, but it ran.
Yeah.
Right? So I got that off of him, and then we found the most ridiculous blower. I think I was telling you about him. A Pepco.
Yeah.
Pepco blower.
Yeah. I asked you because I saw it in your case. You got two of them in this case in here, and I'd never seen this tiny.
Tiny, yeah.
I mean, it's smaller than a football.
Yeah.
Like,
the only thing it would supercharge would be a lawnmower, right?
Yeah.
And but they're vintage. They're like early post-war surplus deals.
What were they originally used for?
So originally they were in bomber aircraft to pressurize the air in the bomb bay.
Wow.
And then after the war, some company bought them surplus for cheap and called them Pepco.
Okay.
And they started making snouts.
Yeah.
For them to fit different cars, Volkswagen or Fiat or whatever little, Crosley.
Yeah.
It'd be good for a Crosley. But, we have a 220 cubic inch motor and this little tiny blower, but it really didn't matter. I don't think it probably either was giving negative boost or zero boost.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it ran.
If it made 10 more horsepower, it took 15 to turn it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But it was free and it ran.
And it put you in that class.
I think we got the record at about 105 miles an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
No shit. That was your first record. What year was that?
That was, I think, 2006.
Wow.
Yeah, either 05 or 06.
Okay. My second trip out was 06 with Jimmy Shine.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't know you then, but that's cool.
That's really cool.
I'm sure I walked by your pit and stared because it was a tanker.
You might have, yeah.
That's cool,
you might have.
That is cool.
It was cool. It's pretty. Now that I look back at it, we were super lucky. I mean, getting to go to Bonneville on your first time and get a record.
That's unheard of.
Absolutely unheard of now. But it was the coolest feeling at the time.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so we were lucky. That's
amazing.
It was a great feeling.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about setting records at Bonneville, like we mentioned. One thing that people don't understand is how hard it is to go fast at Bonneville. There's a lot more there fighting you than anyone understands.
Oh, I mean, it's metaphysical. There's forces at work that you have no idea what they are.
I was totally guilty of it as well. I knew how fast our cars went, like on the highway in Cincinnati. You go out on the highway and like my S10, I could do 120. And you go out there and you see like a blown big block Camaro and it's doing 150. And you're like, what? That thing ought to be way faster than that. Mm-hmm. And then you start talking to guys and you realize that explain to us all the stuff that's fighting out there, from altitude to grip to luck to.
There's so many things. I mean, if it doesn't get rained out and you actually get to run.
Yeah, and it's good salt.
Yeah. And you got a few things going for against you. One, a lot of the times the guys dragging cars out to Bonneville, they're kind of untested unless you got a good amount of money for dyno time.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And most guys who have dyno time usually only do the engine.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I didn't think
But imagine having a car that you really haven't road tested. A lot of these cars, you can't even take them on a road. You can't take the belly tank on a road.
No.
You need maybe a landing strip or something, but who's going to let you, get a bunch of lap time on a landing strip? So, that plays a lot. Like things go wrong with the car because
I didn't think of that.
You don't have a lot of miles on it.
Yeah, a lot of. So you're going to be a lot of breakdowns, a lot of crap on the salt.
Yeah,
parts, oil, everything.
Exactly. And then you've got
yourself. I mean,
Then
the silliest thing could knock your whole week out.
Oh yeah, 100%. One little thing, and then you've got like the dream wheel. You know what, right? You get all these guys. you buy that old Isky piece of paper at the dream wheel, right? So like you turn the dials, right? Okay, I've got this much horsepower,
this gear,
and this is my gear ratio,
this is the tire diameter,
and this is what RPMs I'll run. Oh my gosh, I'm going to go 300 miles an hour. Right?
Yeah.
But
hey, Chubbs the dog just walked in. How you doing, buddy? He's our official mascot.
Hi.
Buddy.
Yeah, so you think you're going to go a certain speed, and then you don't realize that either a lack of traction makes a difference, but aerodynamics. You hit an air wall. And the faster you go, and it's exponential, as you go faster.
I've hit a lot of guys that run out there that talk about, 150. You can get 120 is decent. You can get to 150 with some horsepower, but when you hit 150, you claw and scrape for every mile an hour after that.
Yeah.
And it gets worse as you go. For
sure. And then when you're running vintage stuff too, you don't realize, they have limits. There's RPM limits.
Really?
It says you're running a flathead.
Yeah.
You're lucky to pull 5,500 RPM out of the thing.
Yeah.
It only flows so good.
What's the altitude out there?
It ranges. There's the relative, and they post a thing every day of kind of what the altitude is. But some days it's 8,000.
Wow.
Technically it's 3,000 or 3,500. But some days, because of the weather and everything, it could be 8,000, 9,000.
Really?
So you got to adjust.
And that's why everything's supercharged and blown, because they're just trying to get as much air as they can.
But that puts you in a different class.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you're either naturally aspirated or blown, and then you're either gas or you're fuel. And fuel, you can do whatever you want.
Because of the altitude and the lean conditions, does that make for a lot of burned pistons and stuff?
It can. Yeah, it can. We've burned a lot of pistons.
Yeah. Wow.
We've holed quite a few.
And if you overcome all the silly shit that could go wrong, and the altitude and the grip and the wind, then if you go fast enough for a record, you still don't have a record.
No, you have to do it twice.
To explain that,
I'll tell you, man. There's these gremlins that live in impound. So if you get a record, your car goes to impound, and you only have 4 hours to do whatever it is you want to do to your car.
And they watch it. An SCT official watches you.
Yeah.
Put you on the clock.
Yeah, there's no motor swapping. They're they're keeping an eye on you. You can do oil changes. You can change plugs. You can do head gaskets. You can do that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, man,
pretty much do anything, but you only got 4 hours to do it.
Yeah, you only have a few hours to do it, and then you got to be there at the crack of dawn the next morning.
Yes.
To head out to run, and I'm telling you, something happens overnight. Really? We've had the weirdest Murphy Law stuff happen in impound. You think everything ran great. You get everything all dialed in. You go to the hotel for the night. You come back the next morning. We've had flat tires. We've had.
Oh my gosh.
We've had the engine's full of water.
Oh jeez! Oh
shit! Because you might have done a tiny little crack.
Man.
On a run, and it just dripped in there all night.
Oh.
You hydraulic the motor. Anything you can imagine. We've had the electrical just go out. Just stops working. So there's these crazy gremlins that live there. And then if you're lucky enough to do that run again successfully and nothing breaks, and you make it all the way to the 3 mile or 4 mile, it depends. You can turn off. See, people don't realize you have a choice when you turn off, right? The big cars, fast cars, they go to 7 miles.
Yes.
But the car, if you're only going to do around 150, you can probably get there in 3 miles.
Gotcha.
And then you just pull off. Why hurt your motor anymore?
Yeah, why run it all the way through?
Yeah, so we usually run to the 3 mile, and you have to do the exact same the next day.
Oh, okay.
But
really?
3 miles flat out is tough on a motor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's one thing to say, my motor will turn $7,000.
Right.
Will it do that for a minute and a half?
Yeah, exactly.
Or 2 minutes, that's or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a whole different animal.
It is a different animal.
You start losing, oil pressure can't keep up. The top end of the motors start going dry.
Yeah.
It happens.
It's like you see those dyno poles and the thing just explodes.
Yeah.
It's because you run it hard for a long time.
Wow. In 06, I was fortunate enough to go out there and we set a record in Blown Street Roadster with Jimmy Shine. Mm-hmm. And we went to Impound. And I remember it was my first time. It was my second time to the Salt, but first time with Impounded record setting. And I remember we divided the time up. We did most of the work the night before, but we saved like an hour for the next morning. And now, thinking about what you said, you show up and there's a flat tire. Mm-hmm. You better have some time cushion there to fix that.
You know what I did once? It's funny. So we show up, the tire's flat. We put some air in it. And we realized the rubber valve stem on the tube had split.
Oh, shit, yeah.
And so I'm looking around. We're getting ready to get back in line.
Yeah.
I'm looking around. So I air it up. I wrap electrical tape around it. And I put a hose clamp on it.
Yeah.
And we went about 145 miles an hour.
That's pretty good. That's real good. Damn. So then when you back up the record, they take the average of the two runs.
That's right.
And that has to beat the existing record.
Exactly.
And then you go to the impound, you go to tech then, and then they pump them and full on.
They either pull the motor apart.
Yeah.
And measure it to make sure, you're not cheating.
Wow.
That your fuel, if you're running gas, it's highly regulated. So
that's a pump around on gas, don't you? You have to run their gas.
Yeah. You have to go to their fuel truck.
And then they fill you up and they tape over. They seal your gas lids so they know that you haven't added anything.
They seal it. Mm-hmm. And
that's how we burn a piston. We were running gas, and Mike Whitney and I were on the crew for Shine, and we went through tech, and they gassed it up, and the guy put the tape over the vent hole in the cap, and they vapor locked the system, and we burned a piston. And then you punched him in the face. Oh, yeah, we were hot. Yeah, Chopper Dave was with us, and that was when I first met Chopper Dave, and it was... Man, what an experience. We ended up fixing it we fixed it in the pits and then went out, ran for the record, set it, and had to back it up. I mean, a long week, man. You earn it. It makes it so much. Yeah. That red hat's not just a red hat. You earn it, man. You earn it. And it's stressful. You really got to, watch every little thing. Like the guy taping the thing, you got to watch someone who's doing that. We never thought about that. There was one run, we were changing the oil in the car. And took the cap off the filler, right? Dump in oil. Well, between every oil change, I made sure someone put a rag in the tube because sometimes it gets windy. Oh yeah, salt. There's loose nuts laying around on top of your motor, and so we refilled it. But not thinking we'd left the rag in the oil fill. Okay, so then we go to test fire it. Had no idea it sucked the rag into the pan, right? So, we're waiting in line for hours to race. I head off the line. That rag had just wrapped itself around the pickup. Oh no! And I just had zero oil pressure. Yeah. But I held it. I just pushed it anyway. I'm like, who cares? Were you on a record run? I think we were. Yeah. Record of the checker. And luckily, there was enough splash in there to keep it going. Oh, gosh, that's wild. Oh, yeah, it was crazy. Now, how many records do you own now? I think it's around 7 or 8. Damn. Yeah. That's huge, man. It's been a fun run. That is huge. Well, we got really lucky. It's funny. Bonneville's an evil mistress. No. They'll they suck you in with it's like a slot machine. You won a little, then you won again, and you won again, and then you'll spend the next 7 years losing your ass. Yeah, especially if you're within 5 miles, 10 mile an hour of that record. Oh yeah, you're so close. Yeah, I mean we've had some really amazing streaks of runs, but then really bad ones too. You'll have years you just break. You go back, you break. You go to El Mirage, you break. Wow. It gets rained out, over and over and over. Yeah. One thing I didn't know, because living in the Midwest, we don't follow El Mirage. How many times a year Mirage runs? We all know Bonneville runs once a year and it's in August. But even that, there's a couple meets. But Mirage is pretty regular. Yeah, you get May through November. Is it every weekend, every other weekend?
No, it's once a month.
Okay, once a month, but
Yeah.
still, that's like 5 meets, 6 meets.
Well, they take off August because everyone goes to Bonneville. So,
Makes sense.
May, June, July, September, October, November. So you get 6 meets a year.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That makes,
Yeah.
it makes it worth your while.
Yeah,
It's fun.
it's a
And you almost can use that, if you live out here, you can use that as your test runs for Bonneville.
Oh yeah, and we do all the time. And we're lucky that it's an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
And you can go out there during the week and just kind of do some test runs when no one's
Really?
around. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Damn, that's rare.
It's fun. It's really fun, but it's a short course. It's only a mile and a quarter.
Is it rough, smooth? How's the lake?
It changes every year. Same as Bonneville.
Okay.
Yeah. Good years, bad years.
What's the biggest thing fighting Bonneville right now, other than, is it just the surface that everyone's worried about?
Yeah, it's they've been mining the salt for potash for decades and decades. And
What is potash?
I have no friggin' idea.
Okay.
What a good question.
Because I've heard that they're mining the salt. I just figured they were taking salt.
Sounds like some old hillbilly term,
Yeah.
I'm gonna eat me some potash.
No shit.
With my sassafras.
And then the salt they put, when they take the potash out or however they get that, the salt they put back is not.
They pump.
Same.
Well, they're now pumping a lot back.
Really?
But for the last several decades, they didn't pump any.
Wow.
And then for the last 8 years or so, they've been pumping.
That's another thing some people might not understand is that's not a big, thick bed of salt. That's a thin crust on top of
I mean,
mud
it used
and
to be. It used to be a
Yeah.
big, thick bed of salt, and now it could just be an inch, 2 inches.
And then under that, it's mud and dirt and
Yeah.
shit. Yeah. Wow.
But Mother Nature plays a big part too. It's not you can't blame it all on the mining company. In fact, there was I forgot, some magazine put out a study or some college put out a study of the effects of the salt from the years we've been racing on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
no one wants to talk about that. Bobby.
Let's not talk about that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
But you come home with like 5 pounds of it stuck to the bottom of your car.
We just talked about that at Lawrenceburg Speedway in that podcast. They had to put a new surface of dirt on Lawrenceburg Speedway because they ran out of dirt.
Interesting.
And everyone's like, what do you mean you ran out of dirt? And it was the same deal. You build that place up with like crushed rock and filler, and then they put about 2 feet of good clay for racing on the surface. Well, it gets thrown out. It gets the rain, the top little layer will rinse down the drains. Every race car that leaves the speedway goes in a car wash with 30, 40 pounds of mud on it.
Oh, yeah.
And now after 10 years, he had went through and was down to the filler.
Interesting. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that's crazy. So they were trying to see if there was an effect for racing.
Yeah, and of course there's an effect. I'm sure it's not a minutia compared to the mining. But,
Correct.
But it's making a comeback. It really is. It's not all
Crowd-wise, it's fine. A lot of people, man. A lot of buzz, a lot of people.
Tens, hundred thousands of people.
I can't. Last time I went 06, it was just getting crowded, getting a little,
I think
guys were complaining because they weren't getting to the line. They would wait all day and not get a run in.
Oh, yeah.
And guys were really mad about that. And that was a new thing that had never happened before.
Yeah.
And now
I think I think the first race, the first year we raced, there was about 120 entries.
Okay.
And now there's like 600.
Oh, geez. Wow.
But luckily now they're running 3 race courses.
Really?
So it helps.
Not just long and short. It's okay. Wow.
It's still, you're still waiting a couple hours.
Yeah.
At least.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. We, backing the record up in the morning was probably one of the most surreal, awesome feelings.
Oh, it's like being in heaven when you go out there.
The history you feel in the air is just
Well, watching the sunrise
yes,
is
that's what we did.
So cool.
I tell everyone that goes out there, if you ever go to Bonneville, pick one day, get up. If your guys that are with you won't do it, screw them. Get up, get out there on that salt before the sun rises.
Oh yeah.
And we went out there and we were getting the car ready, and it's dark, and you can hear generators running and lights are going and everyone's working. And you can see the sun's getting close, and the sun actually lights the top of the mountains up next to it before it starts lighting you up. Mm-hmm. And right at sunrise, it goes all quiet. They shut the generators down, it gets quiet, and the sun comes up, and the hair on your arm sticks out.
Oh yeah, it's like seeing God. I mean, it's for a car guy, especially.
It is.
It's ethereal.
And we were in line to run the Roadster, and the SoCal HHR was in front of us in line, and we were with Shine and Tony Thacker, so we were with SoCal, and that was the year that the HHR went through at 300 and crashed.
Oh, I remember that.
We were next in line, and Jimmy was in the car. I had strapped him in, and I was getting ready to put the canopy around him and light the car off, and the HHR took off, and then we heard it was completely out of sight, and we heard over the radios that it was crashing, and Shine jumped out and Thacker jumped out, and they took off in the truck and Thacker's truck to go check on him. And we just stayed there starting line like, oh shit, this is a bad deal. Luckily the guy's all right, but I mean, he crashed hauling ass.
Oh yeah, I mean, crashing out there is never good.
No, I'm amazed at how many guys spin out. That's
Yep.
common.
Yeah,
It's crazy. And they just spin and spin and spin and keep, they
Yeah.
don't crash, they don't flip. It's weird.
It's that, especially roadsters. There's a few cars that like to spin. It's that air wall I was talking about.
It's like pushing snow.
Yeah.
Like a huge pile of snow.
And if you have like a 32
You're wide
grill,
open.
yeah, if you have a grill shell, like a 32 grill shell or something, I mean, it's just a flat brick, and so your rear end is pushing forward, and you got this hand of God pushing against you in the front, and your rear end just wants to flip around. You know?
I've talked to a couple of drivers out there, and you can attest to this, about the crosswind. I know if it's more than I think it's 10 or 15 knots, they won't send you down.
Oh yeah.
But what happens is if say there's a 5-knot wind, and you're hauling ass at 120, and you don't realize it, but you're gently correcting into that wind, and all of a sudden you hit a spot where the wind's not blowing. Now you've got the wheels slightly cut at 120.
Yeah.
And shit happens.
Yeah, that can happen. I did a run. It was a really strong crosswind, and I remember, really having to cross steer against it.
Yeah, your brain's saying we shouldn't be turning the wheel right now.
Yeah, it was weird. I'll use during my run. I usually have my hands on the steering wheel with just my fingertips.
Really?
Yeah, because you're constantly floating and dancing.
Let it do what it wants to do.
Yeah, I'll usually just let it float until it's a little too far, and then just real slowly ease it back. Because every time you turn your wheel, you're losing speed.
Yeah.
You're fighting against that.
Yeah.
And so you almost want to just, even if you're kind of back and forth over the course, you're better off floating and keeping your wheels straight than steering and slowing down too much. But sometimes you have to.
Have you spun out there?
No, the belly tanks don't really spin.
They were built for it.
Yeah, I mean, because they're just so aerodynamic, and that like I said, that polywog shape, they don't. Do
you
spin.
have a push off on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, about 60, 65 miles an hour.
So they push you to 65. The engine's sitting there running, and are you neutral or you got the clutch in?
I've got the clutch in second gear.
Okay. How many gears is that thing?
Only 2.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
we have second, third, and that's it.
Okay.
It's we wanted to keep it super simple.
Yeah.
And we're running all vintage stuff, so it's like a 44,
Gotcha.
Side shift trans. And so I watched my little GPS meter around 60 miles an hour. I'll just drop it into second and punch it.
That's cool. And will brake tires loose sometimes then? I guess it depends on horsepower. But
Depends on horsepower. Sometimes a little
Jimmy's
bit.
car did that once. Because we would shove him to 60 mile an hour, and he left us one time and left black marks.
Yeah.
I said, God damn.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
He had a lot more horsepower than
Well,
me.
yeah, it's a totally different animal. But when you watch the cars out there, you can hear cars breaking loose during the run.
Oh, you hear the.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It's just stuff that you don't think about if you're not.
Yeah.
If you don't ever go there. That's
And
why
there's no electronic traction control. It's you got to watch your tack.
Yeah.
But yeah, the best run we ever did in the tank, we did 165.
Really?
Yeah, it was
Shit.
It was amazing for
On the 4-banger?
Yeah, it was the Model B 32 Ford. With a single overhead cam and a supercharger.
Really?
Yeah, 165.
What supercharger did you end up going to? Is it still a Petco or did you?
No, we ended up.
upgrade?
It was you can't. The problem with the belly tank is your space.
Yeah.
So I found kind of a small Paxton, centrifugal.
Yeah.
And we ran 3 Stromberg 97 carburetors.
Even your carbs are vintage. That's excellent.
Through it and 168. But then
so the carbs are before the blower.
Yeah.
And then you're just Man, do you know how much boost it's creating?
I don't know, probably 6-7 pounds.
Okay.
Not a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But our bell housing exploded.
Oh, shit.
And we couldn't do a backup run.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Took out the clutch, took out a bunch of stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of gear are you running? Ratio?
Usually a 3.0.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. We all joke when we see like a 200 gear, we're like, that's a Bonneville gear.
Yeah.
It's like a term that, thing's got a Bonneville gear in it. But I've wondered what a real Bonneville gear might be.
Yeah. Well, there's that.
I know it depends on horsepower, but still.
There's that, like, you got to find that sweet spot between what your motor can pull, what it caps out RPM wise, or what the peak horsepower RPM you want to be at. And then you pick that gear, because we've tried other gears. Either they can't pull it. It'll take you forever to get up to speed.
I never knew would exist. The Phoenix semi truck, the green semi truck. I heard them do a run when we were out there, and they had changed gear and it wouldn't pull it. Mm-hmm. And it's going across, and this thing is always a rocket, like 300 some an hour, and it's going across the salt, and it's going whir, whir. And as soon as he'd shift, it would start dying, and then he'd downshift and go again, then he'd shift and it'd start dying real slow. And I asked them, like, what's going on? They're like, they got a gear and it won't pull. It actually won't pull. And that's something you never even thought about.
There's so many factors you don't think about in any other kind of racing.
So there's a window that your car's only going to do. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's only going to pull that gear.
Yeah, aerodynamics, horsepower, RPM range, and gearing.
With the vintage class that you're running, what are some, I know, like, no electronics, I'm sure. What's some, like, can you put newer carburetors on it? Can you put newer stuff? Well, we be full roller. How do they justify vintage?
Well, because me and Max and the guys that we run with, we're just vintage freaks. So we're self-regulated.
Good.
Yeah, you can, but it kind of sucks, right? Like
I agree.
You can run.
Have an asterisk next to it.
The only thing that really matters is the block. You have to have an original block.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But you can do anything else. I mean,
billet head, wildest, newest shit.
There's a guy who put a Mitsubishi head on it.
That ain't cutting it for me.
I don't like it either. I mean, that's not vintage to me.
No.
Luckily, we were able to get a bunch of records running real vintage stuff before people like that came in and just wiped it out.
Yeah, and that's what happens. Those guys will come in and just set the record so high, you're never going to set it again with real vintage stuff.
100%.
Yeah.
And you look at that. You look at the motor. It doesn't even. You have no idea there's a vintage block in there. Everything, all this new stuff all over it.
Yeah.
No idea.
It doesn't cut it for me.
No.
I know it's a traditionalist thing, but.
Yeah, I want to see a Vertex mag or a Bosch mag, and I don't want to see some Trigger.
In my mind, if you're gonna go modern, go all the way. Go like.
Well, just run in a modern class.
Go in a modern block. Yeah, go get yourself a billet block and start from scratch and show me what you can do.
Exactly.
Go run 300 or 400 mile an hour and show me what you can do.
Yeah, there's plenty of classes out there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Tell me about the other Bonneville cars you got.
The Wild Turkey.
Yes. By far the prettiest vintage oval track car out there.
Thanks, man. That's nice.
Well, you and I've talked about it. It's you managed to tuck a cage inside the body, and you kept the 1930s lines.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do.
It is hard to do. Luckily, I'm small, so I could like really squeeze in.
Yeah.
And it was the same with the belly tank. We put because you look at the pictures of the old belly tanks, they didn't have to have cages. So they have a head fairing, and everything looks so cool. But nowadays, you got to have a fire system and a roll cage.
Yeah, that roll cage has to be a certain amount, a certain size, a certain diameter.
Yeah.
So far away from your head.
And you're running modern helmets; they're big, so it has to go around your head. So it was tough cramming the cage inside of the head fairing of the belly tank, but we pulled it off, and we kind of did the same thing with the Indy car. Yeah. We were able to get the roll cage inside the body and get it real tight so it doesn't stick out and look funny.
What engine's that car running? Turkey?
Same. We run vintage four cylinders.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So you can switch engines back and forth between the two if need be.
Yeah. We really only run flathead class.
Okay.
And we haven't done an overhead in that class. And we got the record at El Mirage last year.
Cool.
Like a 124.
Excellent.
I forgot what it was,
cool.
but it was nice.
The cool thing is when I look at the records that Lockhart and guys like that were setting not with their streamliners, but with actual Miller race cars and sprint cars. They were running, 120, 130. It's kind of, there's a window there that you're going to run with this car, this type of engine, and that's cool that you're duplicating that, man.
Yeah.
You're right there doing that. That's
Well, it's
cool.
funny too. Like, if you look at a Miller or you look at our race car, it looks really narrow
Yes.
and aerodynamic.
Oh yeah, it pokes a small hole.
Yeah, but it is way less aerodynamic than the belly tank.
Really?
Yeah, because your head's in the wind, your roll cage is in the wind.
That's wild.
It's not a rocket shape.
Yeah.
So the wind has to go around different things, different ways.
Yeah, a lot of little drag spots and stuff. That's interesting.
Yeah, we could swap motors. You'd get probably 20 miles an hour more in the belly tank.
And if you just looked at the front, a silhouette of the front, the belly tank's like a huge dot compared to that little Miller. Mm-hmm. But it's just happier.
Yeah,
That's
if
interesting.
the air flows around it better.
That's wild. Unreal. That Bonneville is an event that's been around for years. I don't know what annual they're on now.
Oh, yeah.
90th.
Well, it started in 49, so whatever that is.
Yeah, probably 670. I think they just had a 75th, didn't they? Something like that.
I mean, Bonneville really is new compared to dry lakes racing because they were racing on the lakes in the 20s, 30s.
Really? Okay.
Well, although they were doing stuff at Bonneville, Malcolm, and
Malcolm Campbell and
all those guys were doing stuff there
Exactly.
in the 20s, 30s as well. I was thinking of like the SCTA style
Correct.
racing. Yeah.
What I'm going to now is that's an event that's been around a while, and luckily since traditional hot rodding and the old ways and every guy's really paying homage to old ways, there's new events that are popping up all over, and one of the big ones is the Race of Gentlemen. Mm-hmm. It's an awesome event. It's in New Jersey. We've talked about it on the podcast before, and you had a lot of help with that. You were happy to say you were involved in that and got to help make that event what it is today.
Yeah, it's a wonderful
It's
event.
cool. I get people like that are non-racing hot rod people that will text me, "Have you ever heard of this event? Mm-hmm. I'm going to it." I'm like, "That's cool that guy knows about it."
That's really cool.
It's not just the club.
Yeah. Well, it's great because it's infectious too. I just told you about they're starting a race on Normandy Beach
That's
in
crazy.
France.
They're going to run on Normandy Beach with cars and motorcycles.
And so it's neat because there's these vintage.
You guys have opened a huge window.
Yeah, there's vintage races popping up all over the world, and that's just so good for the hobby.
It is.
That keeps all this stuff alive. It gets young people involved. But I produced 5 of the Race of Gentlemen races, and super fun. I was really happy to have the time to inject my business sense and whatever else into it, and it's really grown and flourished. I had to stop doing it because I'm way too busy with the projects here in Los Angeles, and I didn't have time to go racing.
You know
what I mean?
You're exactly right.
Yeah,
I've met a lot of guys like that will race for a while, and then they get this idea of promoting a big race, and they go and do that, or a big car show.
Oh yeah.
And they go and do it, and they miss being able just to roll in and enjoy it.
Yeah, it's so much better just rolling in and enjoying it. That's for sure.
Well, Mel and the guys have done a really good job with that. The thing that blows my mind, because I grew up around racing, is to get permission to do that on a public beach, and run cars. It's not easy.
Not easy at all.
What was some of the stuff that you had to deal with the state? You guys had, you and Mel.
It was rough. I mean, because Pismo Beach, I spent a couple of years talking to the people.
Yeah.
It's like convincing. Someone to breathe underwater. I mean, it's like even if
it's gonna work. Trust me,
it'll work. And even when you're sitting there, you're showing them pictures of their actual beach and a race car on it in 1930.
Yeah,
this is your own history. I'm trying to sell you here.
Yeah, this already happened once.
Yeah, but we have lawyers and accountants now, and life's different. And there's people who care about birds and turtles and Happy Earth Day, by the way.
Yes. Let's go racing.
Yeah, and so the concept of leaking oil on the beach or killing a bird or all that, that's all factors now that never existed back in the day. But it like you said earlier, it just takes persistence. You knock on someone's door long enough, they're finally going to buy your vacuum.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a good way to put it.
Just to make you go away.
That's a good way to put it. What are some of the other events that are going on today that you've either been involved with or actually attended?
Oh gosh, the first time I ever dragged race was with that red Roadster I built at the Antique Nationals. Like that was super fun. And it's still going on. There's some cool events that were going on even before I got into hot rodding. That are still going on. I mean, SCTA, the Antique Nationals, the Forever 4 Club does a hill climb.
Yeah, I need to be at a hill climb. I need to do one of those.
Yeah, super fun. And now that I don't produce race events, I get to like explore, go to other people's race events now. RPM Nationals, which some friends of mine started, super fun. It's on a ranch, on a landing strip. The guys in Colorado doing the hill climb and the dirt drags. Yeah. I got to go to England last year.
Oh, you went to Goodwood.
I went to Goodwood, the revival.
So lucky.
It was incredible.
What's that like?
It was absolute time travel. With 100,000 people.
Wow.
It was the coolest thing ever. Wow. Yeah, it was neat.
Now they have vintage racing there on a road course, massive road
Man, they're
course.
Nuts. They're crazy over there. you call it vintage racing, but man, it is. They've got cars out there that are worth $500 million, and
Could be the only one left in the world.
Yeah, and the guys that own the cars. Hire some professional driver to drive it, and he says to him, "I'll give you a huge bonus if you win."
Jeez.
So it's real friggin' racing.
And that driver doesn't give a shit what that car is. No. He's a racer.
No, I saw Ferrari 250 GT like crash into the wall.
Oh my god!
There are a bunch of guys playing with some big money toys, but it's cool. I mean, but we get to enjoy watching it.
And an event like that just helps get, just like we're saying, a huge event like Goodwood on that level of those kind of cars and those kind of people, and Jay Leno and Letterman and all those guys, the famous people go to it. That helps open the door to get us these smaller events like the Ladies and Gentlemen.
Absolutely.
It only helps.
Yeah, it's neat. But it's neat to see these cars go balls out.
Wow.
The coolest thing I saw there, it was a motorcycle race. And all the cars and bikes that are running there, they're real deal. Like they're invited, they're vetted.
Yeah, it has to be the real thing.
They got to have provenance, Yeah. There was this like 27 BMW motorcycle that had a supercharger on it, right? And so they did this motorcycle race. I mean, it was Norton's, Triumphs, Vincent's. I think there was an Indian or two. And then the oldest bike running was this 27 BMW.
Okay.
Right? And it's racing against 60s, BSAs and Triumphs.
Yeah.
This thing smoked everybody.
Really?
It was the fastest bike. And it was all professional riders.
Obviously the guy, knew how to ride it.
Yeah. And it's cool because you're watching the big screen and that bike is not stable. You know what I mean? And you see the handlebars in the front end just wobbling back and forth, and the guy's going, 90 miles an hour.
No kidding.
It was killer.
You're getting it done.
Yeah.
And it's nothing's been updated.
I looked at it in the pit. I mean, I don't know what the internals are, but
still.
It looks old.
Oh, that's wild.
It just killed everybody.
What are some of the other classes they run over there? I know they got like the little saloon cars, they call them, and stuff like that.
Yeah, they've got like the Mini Coopers, a whole class of that, but then they got some cool American muscle. I mean, it's cool because you've got a Goldwing Mercedes racing against a Corvette.
Yes.
Racing against an AC. Those Scarabs, that was kind of a weird mix. A Camaro, Corvette, Mustang. And there was like a Falcon, and these are all cars that ran in the 50s and the 60s.
Yeah, they're a real thing, and they're out there just getting it on.
Yeah, it was cool.
Man. I know they have the racetrack there, and is it on an old airstrip, Air Force Base? How'd that come about?
It's cool.
Because even the place itself is old.
It's old. Yeah. It's neat. I guess the family, the Duke of Richmond.
Okay. It's his land.
It's his land. It's been in the family since like the 1500s or something.
That's so crazy. Longer than the United States has been alive.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And but his father was into racing in the 30s and 40s, and when the war broke out, the RAF was looking for lands to make airstrips out of. So he said, you can use I have this big flat area, you can use it. Yeah. So they built landing strips, they built towers, they built structures. And then what they did was they built a road that went around the entire perimeter so that they could drive pilots out to their plane.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Perimeter road. Yeah, makes sense.
So imagine, just like Americans, imagine, as soon as the road is done, these guys are racing each other around the thing. And it was the first year after the war was over, they held their first race.
Really?
Yeah.
So they knew.
So
this is we got a good racetrack.
Yeah, and it was a real cool racetrack. But there was remember all the bad wrecks in the 60s?
Oh, yeah.
That happened over there. There was a real bad wreck. I don't know if it was McLaren or one of those guys. And it was just getting too fast and too dangerous, and they shut it down.
Okay.
They decided to shut the track down. It was shut down for decades until the current Duke said, you know what? Let's bring it back. We'll do a vintage style. It'll be a completely vintage racetrack.
Okay.
Which is pretty neat.
Cool. That's how. Now, when I watch videos, there's that racetrack, which looks like a racetrack. It's beautiful. And then there is the driveway, I guess. It's a hay bale line driveway.
Oh, the hill climb, yeah. So there's two different events. There's the Revival, which is at the racetrack. It's all vintage. Yeah.
You're the only guy I've had on the podcast that has been to Goodwood, so that's why I'm quizzing you so hard.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I just got invited. That's all.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But there's another event, Festival of Speed. And
okay.
That's at the mansion or the castle or whatever you want to call it.
Same time or the week before? Or?
No, it's
totally different.
months different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
it's more. There's more modern cars.
Gotcha.
They're still vintage, but
they just celebrate speed.
They celebrate everything speed. From
they had the rat trap there. Did like a burnout down like a big front straightaway. Drag racing was a theme that year. They brought top fuel cars there and did burnouts.
Yeah, they had different. Cool. They had a land speed theme one year.
I remember that. I know. Put white crushed gravel down to look like salt.
Yeah,
unreal. No expenses spared.
No, there's no expense spared there. No, at all. It's cool. If you get a chance, you should go.
Very good. Let's get back to your race cars. You're saving some very, very important race cars right now. You've got a handful of vintage sprint cars and Indy cars and whatnot. One of the cars that I worked with you to get was the Hooker Special, the Harry Hooker 99.
Yep.
Tell us about that car.
That's a neat car.
It is.
That's
an important car.
A very important car. And it's also one of those cars that's kind of a crossover between home ingenuity, home build, but also, connection with Harry Miller. For those who don't know Harry Miller, he was the premier race car builder here in Los Angeles. 20s, 30s, 40s. He dominated. He dominated Indy. Yeah. He dominated everywhere for a long time.
I work him into every conversation somehow.
You have to, yeah. You have to. He's kind of our patron saint,
yes,
right?
Yes, exactly.
I got, what led me into open wheel race cars, the early ones, was kind of the same thing that led my attraction to belly tank. It started with hot rodding. Then it led to the belly tank, and then that naturally led to Indy cars. And the reason being is that simplicity and of function.
Yes.
Like it's single purpose built. It's not built for anything other than exactly what it's built for. Even though Harry Miller cars were beautiful, he didn't build them as show cars. No. They were built, every little piece is beautiful because every little piece was made to not break and to go fast around a wooden track.
Be as light as possible.
Yeah. And same with the belly tank. It's purest form of what it is. And that's, people are just naturally drawn to that, I think. And so that same beauty and simplicity led me into really loving early oval track cars. And the more you really start looking at early oval track cars, it comes full circle back to hot rods. You realize, oh wait, all these things in the 30s and the 20s is what inspired the guys to put this on their car, put that on their car, make this
when
faster.
They were pulling fenders off and stripping them down and making them lighter. And
I mean, look at a little later into the 40s, 50s when they started putting Nerf bars and all that on. Those were going on the hot rods at the same time. So there's this neat like symbiotic energy between those two, and to me, and so I want to learn everything I can about. I really dove into the early oval track cars, and they're just gorgeous. And and thank you, by the way, for turning me on to the Hooker Special, which was a car that dominated the dirt tracks of the West Coast.
I'm staring at a picture of it on the wall behind you. And it Babe Staps and right in there.
It's pretty neat, and so the guy Harry Hooker that built the car, knew Harry Miller. Sorry. They were buddies, and at that time, I don't think Miller was really established. He had done the Golden Submarine, Barney Oldfield car, and I think he did one other, but he wasn't really. He hadn't done.
He hadn't won Indy yet. Yeah.
He hadn't won Indy yet. He hadn't created what is now the Offie.
Yes.
He hadn't created the 8-cylinder double overhead cam engines yet. So it's a neat kind of missing link between that and then Hooker bringing him a Model T block and say, hey, can you make this thing go faster?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he designs a double overhead cam
to
head
adapt to the Model T block.
To adapt to the Model T block.
Wow.
And it kicks everybody's butt. At the time.
Yeah. And that was in a single-seater sprint car, what I would call bobtail. It didn't have the big
it was a no-tail.
Yeah, it was a no-tail. There's no tail back there like a sprint car, Indy car we know. It's just the driver. It cuts off right behind the driver, and there's a little gas tank right behind him, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it's which makes it lighter and faster, right away.
Yeah.
That car went on just a tear, winning everything.
It did. I mean, it killed 4 or 5 drivers in its lifetime.
It was a quick piece.
Yeah. And they weren't really made to be that strong back then. I'm sure they were losing axles and wheels and breaking frames and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, well, you start turning more horsepower than parts are able to handle at that time.
Yeah.
That car was a big winning car, like across the country, but really heavily at Ascot and out west. I can't believe how much of that car survived. You have most of the engine, don't you?
Oh yeah, the complete engine. Yeah.
Unreal. It was that car was restored later in life, like in the 50s or 60s. Was it restored?
Yeah,
because it was such an important car.
By Lindley Bothwell, who was one of those early collectors of the West Coast, anyway.
Yeah.
He had the foresight back then. Lindley Bothwell, who I never got to meet. He was before my time, but he did some cool stuff.
Okay.
I mean, he was doing stuff like T.R.O.G in the 50s.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
he was bringing back the Santa Monica road races.
You showed me a picture of it's 19 teens Indy cars lined up, and De Palma's the flagman, and he's an old guy.
Yeah.
And it's a vintage race in like the 40s.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
He's recreating like the Vanderbilt Cup races of the teens, in the 50s. So it's kind of the same thing. Me recreating a drag race from the 50s. It's the same thing.
Even those people liked to pay homage to the cars they grew up with.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah,
that is cool.
And so it sat in his collection forever. That's why it survived all those years. But it wasn't. It was a much later incarnation of the car.
Yes.
And then it got kind of blown apart and messed up. So I'm restoring it back to kind of its original look.
Very cool. How's it coming along?
Good. Frames getting worked on, motors getting worked on.
Who's the guy that's doing the work?
My buddy Chris Camacho.
I follow him on Instagram, and the work looks amazing.
Yeah,
he's a great job.
He's he's a young guy. He just started his own shop. He worked at Hollywood Hot Rods for years.
Cool.
And then Max from H&H is working on the motor.
Good. What's Max think of the engine? Is he just seeing some stuff that's blowing his mind?
Yeah.
I mean, it would be like looking into a time capsule of what guys were doing at that time.
For sure.
And not only just some run-of-the-mill engine that time, like the engine of the time that was winning.
Yeah, even though it's a Model T, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. What's some of the other cars you're working on?
I working on a Stutz.
Yes.
which is neat because Stutz is built in Indianapolis, and like last year I got to tour the factory.
Wow.
Which they've kind of now turned into like an artist colony.
Okay.
But the whole building's really intact. The guy that owns the building collects Stutz's.
Oh, wow.
And so he's really all about keeping it.
Is that the guy that has the recreation of the Blackhawk?
Yeah. It's there.
Wow.
And a bunch of nice cars. So I got the tour. That was really cool to see that. And Stutz, Stutz is neat. It's kind of a whole new chapter in my realm of knowledge. Things were made. It's not a hot rod. It's not a Ford.
No.
It's like, whoa, man, this is totally different engineering.
Yeah.
But it's cool to get your hands on it and learn that. And then I was extremely fortunate last year to get a real Miller, another Miller race car, but a later Miller race car. After Miller had perfected his straight 8 engine in the 20s that won so many races. And it's Ralph De Palma's very last race car he had in 1931. So it's incredible car. I'm learning so much just from tinkering with it.
Yeah, we've gotten to play with it this weekend. That car hasn't ran since the early '90s, mid '90s.
Yeah, '93.
And you and I got to play with it this weekend, and I was blown away that everything on the car is still in great condition. We had spark. I mean, we got fuel. Nothing's leaking. And the brakes actually came back. And for a car to sit that long, it's rare. But what I've noticed with that car, the closer I look, is every part on that car is the original part.
Yeah.
It's not like, we had a bucket full of pieces, let's recreate the car. That's the car.
Oh yeah. It's quite possibly one of the top 5 still intact original Millers.
Yeah, it's extremely together. What's your plans for that car? Just bring it back and run it at vintage events?
Yeah, I'm the kind of person, I don't like seeing cars sit around. They need to be run. Even cars in big museums, I think they got to get them out and run them once a year, even once every 10 years.
I agree. That's part of the history.
It is. It is. Everything can be fixed.
Exactly. And we're never going to fully understand that history unless we can see it and hear it. That's why events like the Miller Meet and that are so good.
Yeah.
It's the only place you can go and hear a Miller actually running, not just firing it off. They're actually running them. I mean, they're screaming.
Oh, I love the Miller Meet. I can't wait to get back to the Miller Meet. But it's fun. That's why everyone always talks about how much they love Wheels Through Time Museum.
Yes.
Because every time they go there, they got, they're firing up a bike.
Yep, Matt and his dad, they got him running.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
And can you imagine if every museum you went to, once every hour they fired up a different car?
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be huge.
Change everything.
It would change everything.
Because every kid out there loves that.
So attention, museum owners.
Yeah, we want everything to run. Bobby, that's awesome, man. I know we've just barely scratched the surface, but and I'll be out here again to do this, but because I'm lucky enough to I took care of the Eastwood Special for you and a couple other cars. So I'd like to sit down and do this again, and because the way it works, as soon as we walk away from this, we're going to think of 10 topics we want to talk about.
Well, I mean, that's true. We've still got to talk about, inspiring youth to get involved with our hobby. There's so many things we need to touch upon. But thanks so much for coming out.
Oh, awesome. I've had a blast. We got to see everything from the crazies at Venice Beach.
That's a must.
Oh, yeah, to the crazy bum on the corner fighting demons.
Yeah.
The guy was getting after it.
Yeah, it's pretty much every day in L.A.
Oh, it was so good. And my Ferrari and Lamborghini count right now is up to 9. So
really, that's
9.
it?
Yeah. Well, I haven't went through Hollywood or anything.
That's because you've only been here 2 days.
Yeah, exactly.
So you saw Simon Cowell yesterday?
We saw Simon Cowell. He turned left in front of us in traffic. Like I drove by, I'm like, that's that Simon dude.
Driving a Bentley?
Yeah, driving a black. Well, I was looking at the Bentley. It was a black Bentley with the top down. And I even told Jenny, I'm like, check out the Bentley. And as soon as the light turned green, I'm like, that's Simon. Hey, buddy. And then Kat Von D walked past us on the sidewalk. That was pretty good. So, yeah, it's been the full experience, man.
You've had a good tourist trip to L.A.
It's been a full experience. Cannot thank you enough.
Absolutely.
Thanks. We will do this again soon.
Sounds good. Awesome. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.